Hello and welcome to the Made by Mumino Knitting podcast. My name is Kathryn and I'm recording today in Mönchengladbach in Germany, which is kind of halfway between Dusseldorf and the Dutch border. And I live here permanently with my partner Anastasios. And it's a beautiful sunny day here today in Germany. So welcome if you're a returning viewer, and a very warm welcome if you've just found me. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, a quick drink of tea in my really cute mug. So this is my little corner of the internet where I talk about my knitting projects, what I'm working on at the moment, and all yarny goodness. But today is a little bit different. I'm pre-recording this episode because I'm not around to do my usual episode. Business will resume as usual in a few weeks' time. So normally I record an episode every 2 weeks, but I'm actually away when you're watching this. So yeah, this is a bit of a departure from the normal. I'm not going to talk about my finished objects or my whips or future knitting plans. Well, maybe a little bit. Today I'm going to talk through my favourite gift knits. We're fast approaching the gift knitting season, and I tend to knit the same patterns over and over again for people, and I'm sure that you do the same. So I thought I'd give you some of my ideas of what I like to do for gift knitting, and I would love it if you could give me some suggestions below in the comments. So as usual, everything I talk about is linked below. I make chapters, so if you want to skip through to a particular part, feel free to do so. And feel free to reach out and chat to me if you have any thoughts or comments about the episode. Like I said, any ideas about patterns would be gratefully received. I've divided up this episode into 4 parts. The first part is just some general things that I keep in mind when I'm gift knitting. And then I've divided it into small projects, so for less than a skein or kind of scrappy bits. Then medium-sized projects for 1 skein or more, 1 to 2 skeins, and then larger projects of 2 or more skeins. Let's get started. I've got lots of notes here, so if I keep looking down here, it's because I've got Ravelry and things open. So Anyway, I hope you're well and ready to dive into some gift knitting. So firstly, let's talk about general rules of thumb. Firstly, I don't see gift knitting necessarily as it's a two-way street. The person who's receiving the gift is getting a lovely, wonderful hand-knitted item that hopefully they'll treasure and will fit into their lives beautifully. But also it's an opportunity for us to balance the scales a little bit in terms of yarn stash, getting rid of scraps, using up precious bits of yarn that would otherwise sit around in our stash gathering dust and potentially attracting moths. So it's a nice way to keep my stash ticking over. So with that in mind, I try to pick gift knits that are very versatile, that can be adapted to a range of yarn weights and can be adapted to various materials, different fibre contents. I think probably the main thing to think about is checking and gauge swatching. For instance, the first pattern I'm going to talk about is a musselburgh. That's already pre-designed for a variety of yarn weights. You make the gauge swatch as you're beginning the hat, and then you can assess how many increases you need to do to make the desired size. In theory, you can do that with most patterns. It just requires a little bit of thought and a little bit of maths. It is more tricky to do it on garments to be closely worn, like jumpers, sweaters, cardigans, that kind of thing. But for non-fitted items, accessories, it's much, much easier to do. So the easiest thing is gauge swatching. I hate gauge swatching. I don't tend to do it very often unless I absolutely have to. I kind of use my cast on as a gauge swatch most of the time, unless it's for a test knit, or I've never worked with the yarn before, and then I do make myself gauge swatch and block it, because that's what we should do as knitters. But let's face it, we don't always have the time to do that. But yeah, gauge swatching is really important. For instance, the last pattern that I'm going to talk about is a pattern for 4-ply yarn, but I have recently made the same pattern in an extra bulky weight yarn, but I'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so let's kick off with the one skein or under projects. As I mentioned before, my favourite go-to pattern has to be the musselburgh. I love it. It's such a versatile pattern. I tend to use random skeins or leftovers from projects, making jumpers and things for this, because you need under 100 grams for an adult size. Yes, to make a decent size hat, it's definitely less than 100 grams. However, if you look at the hashtag musselburgh hat on Instagram, you will see a wide range of adaptations. So people have done scrappy versions, stripy versions. I'm knitting a stripy version myself at the moment. So it's a really good opportunity to use up little remnants from projects. You could even try doing a mild version if you're feeling confident with that. And just go for it to use up those little scrappy skeins that you've got lurking about the place. I've also done this pattern in cotton and I'm really, really happy with the outcome. It's not as stretchy, but for people who are vegan or who have some sort of fibre intolerance, it's a really good option to think about. Okay, my second pattern to talk about, you will have seen if you have been watching my more recent episodes, and that's the watch cap from Pearl Soho. It's a free pattern. There's also a pair of mitts that come with it. They're little hand warmers, little fingerless gloves. And again, this is a very versatile pattern. I would recommend this for a DK weight yarn. But again, if you gauge swatch and fiddle about with the cast on, you can probably make it fit the yarn that you've got. I think that a rib pattern is tricky to do in stripes. I think sometimes there's just a bit too much going on for my taste anyway. So I think I probably stick to a unicolor in this, but it's also a good opportunity to get rid of remnants of mohair or another lace weight yarn. So in that case, I would take a 4-ply yarn and hold it together with mohair. And I love using scraps of mohair for projects like this because then you can change the color without it being really bold and obvious. So to have maybe beginning with a grey mohair when you're holding it with a pink main colour and then switching to a white or to a cream or to a pink, it'll be a really subtle colour change and make a really subtle stripe that I think is very effective and very nice. So yeah, the watch cap is a free pattern from Pearl Soho. So all of these patterns, I'm going to make a bundle in my Ravelry group as well, and my Ravelry group is linked below. So if you want to have a look at any of these patterns. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is a cowl, and this is the Snuggle Down cowl from Jules Hill. This is a lovely pattern. I've knit easily six of these, probably more, and it's a great user upper of a 4-ply with a mohair or a sport weight yarn. Again, you could do this with a DK or higher as well. You would just need to just be mindful about the number of stitches that you cast on. It's a relatively simple, quick pattern to make. It's very memorable with an easy stitch repeat. But it makes a very pretty, squishy finished garment accessory. So I would definitely recommend this one as well. I think if you were thinking about what colour you used, it would be suitable for men and women or children. But again, I tend to use this one when I've got remnants of 4-ply and remnants of mohair lurking about. And that makes a really, really, really nice, squishy, very luxurious feeling gift for somebody. I've even got one for myself. If you have a look in my project pages on Ravelry, I made one a couple of years ago for myself from a gorgeous special skein from Schwedenrod yarn in here in Germany, and I held it with some mohair. But oh, it's so pretty. It just feels so lovely and fluffy when I wear it. It feels gorgeous. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is another free pattern, And this one is Rafa's hat from Jochi Locatelli. And I've made a couple of these for people, and the yarn is recommended. The recommended yarn is a worsted weight yarn, but I have made this in a DK and it's turned out really well. I just went down a needle size and went up a head size. This is available in 3 different sizes, and it's a really nice simple pattern. Again, it's another ribbed hat, but there's a little bit of interest in it as it's got those pearl bump rows as you go up, and it's also got a more standard decrease as well, whereas the pearl Soho one that I showed you, the watch cap, has that kind of twisted decrease. So if you want something that's a little bit more plain, this would definitely be one to think about. It works really, really well with scraps of yarn. So I used maybe half a skein of DK when I was a bit more than half a skein of DK when I've made one of these. So yeah, nice for when you've got a leftover skein of yarn from making a jumper or something like that, perhaps. But yeah, you could also experiment with holding different yarns together if you wanted a more fluffy version too, I think. Okay, the next one to talk about is the Winter Smiles headband. Now I know that Drop's design is a little bit controversial, but it's just a really great pattern, and I've made it so many times for friends. I initially made one for myself, and then a couple of friends saw it and they loved it, so I made a few more. My first one I made in, I think it was a fingering weight alpaca held with a mohair. But I've also made that in a few different combinations, but the nicest one is in a squishy DK. It comes in 3 different sizes again. This one's a bit more tricky to fit, so it's helpful to have a bit of an idea of how big the person's head is this way, which can be a bit tricky to gauge. But if you can maybe steal a hat that they've already got, that would be helpful. It's a really simple pattern because you just knit, it's a free pattern if I didn't say. You just knit a tube, twist it and sew the ends together. It's just ridiculously easy and it's very quick. I would like to say that I've made one of these in a day, but over 2 days. Does that make sense? So if you put your mind to it, you could sit down in the morning and I reckon you could finish it by the evening if you had literally nothing else to do and whatever, but who has time for that? But it's a really nice pattern, nice and simple, and yeah, another good gift. Another option would be something like a mitten. I really prefer giving mittens as gift knits because they're easier to fit and they just look really cute and cozy. So recently I did a test knit for Emma Pliska for the Evermore mittens. This is a great pattern. It's not a free pattern, but it's really good because it comes with specific instructions for several different yarn weights. It's also an interesting pattern because it's not just knitting around in circles. You have to do the pattern, the texture, as you can see in the picture there, and it's gradually increasing and gradually decreasing to create that bit of interest. So if you want something that's a bit more mindful, that you are going to enjoy knitting, I would definitely recommend this pattern. And I have knit this in unspun and also in a bulky weight yarn as well. So yeah, it was a super versatile pattern and really, really good value. If you like the pattern, there's also a couple of other ones that the same designer does, like the I think it's called the mirror ball beanie, that matches. It has that same textured pattern on the crown. But if you go and have a look at my Ravelry page, you'll see me wearing the set made in unspun from Rain, Cloud and Sage, and they're really, really pretty, really nice pattern. Okay, the last one that I'm going to talk about for this section, for the 1 skein and under, are the penny gloves from Petite Knit. They're a really popular pattern, and probably for a reason. They're very simple to knit, they look very elegant. Also, it's nice that you can keep knitting until you run out of yarn to make the wrists as long or as short as you want. You can also mess about with how long you make this part here, depending on who you're knitting it for. The pattern is designed for a sport weight, but again, you could experiment with holding together different yarns. Making scrappy ones would be fantastic, actually. Ooh, I might make some scrappy ones. Anyway, focus. They're one size, so in order to make them bigger and smaller, you would have to play with the needle size. So the recommended needle size for this is 3mm US 2.5 or 2.5. So in order to make them a bit smaller, you just have to maybe go down a needle size or bigger up a needle size. So you'd have to experiment a little bit with that. But I don't have particularly large or small hands, and I found that they fit me really nicely. I did make this part here a bit shorter because I have quite short hands. So maybe you just want to experiment a little bit to make the right size for you. Okay, let's move on to the medium size projects. The first one I'm going to talk about is a lacy shawl, which seems a little bit counterintuitive for a quick gift knit, but it's a relatively simple pattern. So I'm a big fan of Woolenberry. She's a prolific shawl designer and has a fantastic website with so many to choose from. But one of my favourites is the Melodia, and I've knit this a couple of times, one for my mum and one for my mother-in-law. And it looks like a very simple but very pretty shawl, but it's just achieved with yarn overs, so it's not too difficult to keep in your mind. You make a certain number of garter stitch rows and then you insert a yarn over row and so on, with some increases as you go along. Now technically you could make this shawl as large as you want. When I've made it, I've used 2 complete fingering weight skeins, so 200 grams, and I just kept going until I ran out of yarn following the pattern. I did find it really meditative because you've got those nice garter stitch sections in between the yarn over rows, and I just really enjoyed knitting this. And again, you could go up needle sizes to increase the yarn weight, or hold different yarns together. I think this would work really, really well as a scrappy version, and blending in, especially if you were holding the same mohair all the way through. I think it would look really, really special. So yeah, check out Woolenberry and her other patterns as well. But this one is my preferred one for gift knitting. The next one is a free pattern, not dissimilar from the one I just showed you, but a bit of a different construction. Again with garter stitch and yarn overs, but just in an asymmetric form instead. And it's called the May I Borrow This Please from Lorraine Waitman. I've seen a few different people knitting this. I haven't made one myself yet, but it's on my list. And it just looks like a really, really nice pattern. And again, it looks like it would be perfect for using up some leftover skeins, and or even a special skein if that's what you've got in your mind. So the original pattern is designed for a DK weight on a 5.5mm, so that would be a super quick knit as well. But I think I would probably do this with 4-ply remnants, maybe held with a mohair, and probably knit this on a 4mm needle rather than the 5.5 or US 9. And I would just keep going until I got it to the size that I was happy with. Shawls and scarves are fantastic for gift knits for that reason. You're in control of how big it is. It doesn't need to fit a particular body shape or anything. You can just use the yarn until it feels like the right size. I knit one shawl recently, the dotted rays shawl from Stephen West, and I just kept going until I'd used up 3 skeins of fingering weight because I was enjoying knitting it so much and it just looks so beautiful. So yeah, shawls and scarves, very versatile when it comes to gift knitting, definitely. Another option, if you're feeling a bit more adventurous, is to do a little bit of colour work. Now, in my last episode, I talked about the winter doodle sweater that I'm making at the moment. The same designer, Pacific Knit Co, Jamie Lomax, she makes doodle decks, and they're gorgeous, and they are such good value for money, because once you have them and you have the basic patterns, so cowls, hats, and now a sweater, you can apply them in any way that you want. So each garment or accessory that you make can be totally unique. Last year I made a holiday doodle cowl for myself. Now I made the infinity version, which means that you knit a tube. The whole thing is colour work. You can do plain sections if you want. I just wanted to do all colour work. You twist it and then graft the ends together. However, there are other options for double-sided cowls and single-sided cowls as well. And they're surprisingly quick to knit. So the holiday doodle cowl that I've linked below, this one is for a DK weight yarn, and it's on a US 5 or a 3.75 millimeter needle. Now, if you're knitting something that's that tall, colour work going round, that's not going to be a slow knit. That's pretty quick going, and you get such a special gift to give to somebody while being able to use up some of your remnants. Because the beauty of it is you've got all of these motifs, so you can basically kind of use your yarn as and when you want to, and mix and match your colours as and when you want to, depending on the recipient, depending on the season, or whatever, or the occasion. But I love Jamie's patterns. They really are nice, and she does such a range of different doodle decks that they're suitable for everybody. I made the mountain doodle cowl, I think it was, for my brother last year, in woolly knit, held double, brown and like an off-white colour, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it, and it was fun for me to knit as well, which is really important. Yeah, so check out Jamie's patterns as well for some ideas. Also, you don't have to make the whole cowl in the motifs. You could do a motif and a plain section and a motif. So yeah, they're super versatile, and I really, really do recommend them for some fun knitting. Okay, so the last section to talk about is larger projects. Now, I've gift knit the puntal several times for one for my dad and for my brother and for my partner. It's a big thing to knit a sweater for somebody as a gift, but if that's what you would like to do, I cannot recommend that pattern enough. The puntal is clear, simple, easy to understand, and also easy to adapt if you want to make it striped or scrappy or whatever. So I love that pattern. You can have a look in my Ravelry page at all of the projects that I've made with that pattern, but there are so many online to look at for inspiration as well, so have a look at those. I've also included this blanket, which is why it's behind me today. This is the Habitation Throw by Helen Stewart. And again, it's a gorgeous pattern. This one I made with an advent set I had a couple of years ago from Meadow Yarn, and it's beautiful. So it's 4-ply, super wash merino, and it's super soft. It's lovely. I have put a couple of other little scraps in with it as well, but mostly it's that advent, and it's just really beautiful, really gorgeous. I think this was the main skein that came with it as well. But even though the pattern, okay, firstly, Helen Stewart patterns are amazing. She does line by line instructions, and as you're going through, she tells you what percentage through you are. Mwah. I love it. I love it. They're perfect to do when you're busy, because they're really easy to keep your place in, and they're super easy to follow. Also, blankets are super easy to adapt as well. At the beginning of the episode, I mentioned about taking a pattern that was initially for 4-ply and switching it out for bulky. And this is what I was talking about. So I made my brother and his partner a bulky weight Habitation Throw on 10mm needles, using, I think, 2 strands of West Yorkshire Spinners Retreat held double. And I made it in a few days, and it looked so nice and it was so squishy and cozy. Just because this has got, I don't know, whatever, 200, 300 odd rows in it, doesn't mean that your final blanket needs to have so many rows. If you do it on a larger size needle with a heavier weight or gauge of yarn, you're not going to need to knit for so long to achieve the same size. So the only thing you do need to do is make sure you do an even number of decreases as increases. Does that? Yeah, obviously. So this is a paid for pattern. Really, again, a lovely pattern. I love Helen Stewart patterns, and they are perfect for Advent boxes and Advent sets as well if you have one. I'm sure you have already seen these patterns so many times, but really it is one of my go-tos. However, if you want a free pattern that kind of follows a similar idea without so much finesse, have a look at the traditional dishcloth pattern by by Very Pink Knit. It's a dishcloth. I love giving people little sets of dishcloths. Leftover 100% cotton, you can make a little stack of dishcloths for somebody, tie them up in a ribbon and give them as a gift with a little bar of soap. Lovely, can't go wrong. But you could also go up 10 needle sizes, hold 4 different types of yarn together and make an enormous dishcloth / blanket. And just for fun, as you're increasing, throw in a yarn over row every now and again. So yeah, it's an option, and I have made one of those as well for my other brother and his wife, and it was really simple to make. I held I think it was an acrylic yarn with a mohair and a strand of woolly knit all together to make this sort of blended pink, purpley grey blanket, and it's gorgeous. I kind of almost wanted to keep it. But it was a really good way of using up some leftovers from some different projects, and I was really happy with the outcome. So that's another option. Take a dishcloth pattern, a free dishcloth pattern. This one is a good one. And yeah, run with it and just see how big you want to make the blanket. And there's just something so lovely about the thought of making a big squishy blanket for one of your loved ones, I think anyway. So just a last note that I like to try and do when I'm giving somebody something that's made of yarn, I, just for my own peace of mind, tie a little parcel label to it that says what it's made of and the best way to wash it. I try to avoid giving people things that can't be machine washed if they're not knitters, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So yeah, giving them a label with some care instructions, and then it's on them if they don't wash it correctly or if they accidentally felt it. But you know, it is what it is. Yeah, like I said, I hope you find something in that helpful. And also, as I said, business as usual will resume in the next episode. And thank you so much for sticking with me if you have watched to the end. And happy gift knitting. Take care. Bye bye.